So if the average Black family wealth continues to grow at the same pace it has over the past 3 decades, it would take Black families 228 years to amass the same amount of wealth that white families have today. It would take Latina families 84 years. And some of you may have seen this. I'm quoting this from the Ever-Growing Gap, which is a report released by Prosperity Now in 2017. Associated Black Charities, we released a report in April last month that analyzed the patterns of employment by race in Baltimore City and Baltimore metro region and found that 63% of African-American workers in the city and 58% of African-American workers in the metro region are concentrated in 4 sectors, right? Some of the information you saw earlier today. Those 4 sectors include retail trade, transportation and warehousing, admin support and waste management, and healthcare and social assistance. Not only are they concentrated in 4 sectors, they're also concentrated in low-wage jobs, low-wage, low-skill jobs in those sectors. The study also found that the turnover rate for African-American workers is 12%, which is higher than the rate for white workers and higher than the national average. And to add insult to injury, the report revealed that wage disparities range from $4,000 to $60,000, with white workers making more than Black workers, and this is breaking down across industries. Now imagine if you were one of these African-American workers and you were concentrated in a low-wage, low-skill job making less than $12 an hour, and you were more likely than your white counterparts to lose your job. How would you even begin to think about building your own personal financial wealth? For some of us, this data might be startling, but for those of us that are working with and advocating for our most marginalized populations, this isn't new. And what all of this tells me is that we have missed countless opportunities to change the economic landscape for individual workers, for the businesses that employ them, and for the city and state that relies on their tax dollars. What if instead of devaluing our low-wage frontline and entry-level workers, we invest in them so that they can gain the additional skills needed to not only advance their careers, but to also advance the businesses in which they work, creating a win-win for both the worker and the employer? What if we stopped talking about career ladders and career pathways and we actually invested in career lattices or cross-sector building, skill building? Because we know that careers are rarely linear and we all take a zigzag path to find our way. With Maryland being a majority people of color state, we can no longer afford to continue to shuffle our workers of color back and forth between low-wage jobs because we refuse to acknowledge the racialized policies and practices that live within our employment systems. We can no longer afford to think that the road to personal financial wealth building is the individual's responsibility alone, because if it were, then we wouldn't have the need to discuss the fact that many of our workplaces are not designed to ensure the success of our workers of color. Let me be clear, a job does not equate to wealth. However, a job that pays a living wage and encourages and supports skill building and advancement opportunities for its most marginalized frontline entry-level workers is a job that can lead to a career which can lead to wealth building opportunities such as home ownership and maybe even business ownership. Because let's be honest, it's impossible to think that someone making $12 an hour can budget their way to home ownership or can dig themselves out of a credit card debt or student loans. We have to do more. And I use the word we because the economic outcomes of our most marginalized communities impact all of us. So the onus is on each one of us here today to think intentionally, and that's what I heard from everyone on the stage, is taking an intentional investment, right? To think about the ways that we can support our workers of color, especially when the data shows us that the odds are stacked against them and the outcomes are racialized. For the employers in the room, start by examining your own internal culture and think about providing transportation supports or childcare subsidies for your workers making under $30,000 a year. Consider providing flexible schedules so that these workers can take advantage of the professional development opportunities that you may offer without having to worry about childcare or even losing their job. Consider peer mentors within the company who can help a worker navigate and advance within the systems they're working in. Think about forecasting your employment needs 3 to 5 years out and pair your soon-to-be retired employees, because we know that's going to be happening soon, with your frontline workers so that you don't lose the institutional knowledge that lives within your aging employees, and you train your replacement and advance them along the way. Consider vetting your HR policies and practices with ABC's, shout out, 10 essential questions for workforce and policy development, and approaching them with an equity lens. Using explicit language around equity and inclusion in your job descriptions and in your hiring practices. For my funders in the room, let's consider providing funding to upskill our workers in partnership with employers, because we know that by subsidizing the cost of upskilling for low-wage entry-level workers to receive additional training to advance their careers, you can really help a family move out of poverty. And let's make a commitment as funders to track and disaggregate data and outcomes by race, so we can be sure that workers of colors are actually advancing. For my providers in the room, let's not start and end the conversation with an entry-level job. Let's help our clients map out their career journey, including training needed along the way to ensure that they actually achieve their career goals, which we know is critical to them achieving their personal financial goals. The Alice report by the United Way of Central Maryland tells us that a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, need to make $120,000 a year in Maryland in order to be stable and to begin to save in order towards building wealth. This means that the adults in that household should be making at least $30 an hour each. And if we think about the single parent households, that means if they're a single parent, they need to be making $60 an hour, right? Let's target these industries and occupations that can lead to these wages and beyond. For my policymakers and advocates in the room, vet your policy and advocate that policy is vetted with a racial equity lens to ensure that you aren't intentionally or unintentionally marginalizing or continuing to marginalize populations of color. We have a tool for this too. And for my individual workers in the room, don't be afraid to advocate for your needs. Challenge the systems that work to keep you marginalized and commit to keeping us all accountable, because without you, our society would only survive and not thrive. And if I've excluded anyone, please forgive me, and know that I look forward to working with each one of you to continue the discussion and create real solutions towards change. Thank you very much.